Hi, everybody. Welcome to Finding a Job That's a Good Fit. Thank you for tuning in. I'm here with Taylor, Shawn, and David. And pass it over to Taylor to kind of give you an idea of what he does and what he works for.
Sure, thanks. Cool. So yeah, my name is Taylor Crane. I'm currently a senior product manager at a startup here in New York called Hello Alfred. And then yeah, a bit about my background. So I graduated from Washington University in St. Louis about almost 7 years ago. And then since then, I've been working in startups my whole career. So I spent about 3 years at a very small startup called CrowdTap in the marketing tech space. And then about 3 years at a company called Originate, which is sort of like a startup development shop where we partner with startups and we'll build their technology in partnership with them. And then actually very recently I left Originate and I'm about 3 months into Hello Alfred, again, where I'm a senior PM. And so excited to talk more about the process of finding a job at a startup. I've done it a few times now and definitely have some insights, so we'll see.
Cool. And Shawn?
Awesome. Yeah, my name is Shawn Vo. I'm currently the CTO and co-founder of a startup in New York called Axel. I graduated from UVA in 2013, and right out of college, I joined a big investment bank. So I joined Barclays in New York City. So I was doing finance there. Realized that I didn't really like it, so I quit right after my first year bonus, and then moved to San Francisco, where I joined kind of this mid-sized company. And that was awesome. I went from, getting yelled at my bosses to getting massages every week. So it was a really, really good life experience. But then the company did pretty well. It got acquired. And then I moved back to the East Coast to start working on my own company. And that's kind of where I am today. So I'm happy to talk about kind of the whole spectrum of these companies, even though I've basically only done each for about a year and a half.
Cool. What about you, David?
Hey guys. Yeah, so my name's David. I'm a product manager at a startup called Handy in New York City. So I'm actually fresh out of college. I graduated last year, so in 2017. So I probably have I remember during that time I was considering different options between big companies, small companies. Also just fresh off a recruiting cycle too. So I was so I was running that gauntlet. It was also a lot of experience. But my internships we're at a range of companies actually. My freshman summer, I interned at a hedge fund. Kind of like Shawn, did finance for a bit, realized I didn't like it. And then my sophomore year, I decided to go into tech. And since then, I've been working on growth and operations and product at larger and smaller tech companies. And then I ended up, my senior year, I wanted to work at a startup. And so, yeah, that's how I ended up here.
So, everybody's had a few now. So I guess I'm interested in what's different from your college job search position now and how you went about getting this position. We'll start with Taylor.
Cool. So Chanel, you were breaking up a little bit, but I think what the question was how my job search has differed from my first search and finding my job after college to what it is or what I went through now looking and finding Hello Alfred. Is that correct?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah. So I actually think very different. And I think it's mostly dependent on the goals that I had at those different times. So when I was coming out of college, my only goal was to join get a job at a small startup in New York City, and it was pretty naive with respect to what that meant, but also didn't care too much about the industry or what I'd be working or what my role would be, et cetera. And so I was just looking for any startup that would hire me, and that lends itself to one strategy. And then contrasting that with Alfred and the job search that I actually recently completed was a much more sort of focused, patient job search. I really was focused on trying to find a great fit at a startup that I really could believe in and grow with. And so that and frankly, just a lot of effort, if you will. to find what I thought would be like a really great fit. I think like in addition to that, like my focus with respect to like what I was looking for in my next search was very different from when I found my first job, which was CrowdTap. I was super focused on the product that we were going to be working on, who the CEO was, and the stage of the company that we were at. Whereas at CrowdTap, again, I really couldn't really care less as long as it was a startup.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with that in the sense that like when you just graduate, all of your friends are getting jobs, and you just like you feel this like pressure to like go and get a job immediately. So I think that like system, lends itself to like you kind of like rushing this decision a little bit. I would also say that like coming out of school, you have a lot of opportunities open to you. For example, like you're basically joining like any sort of like entry level role. Whereas like after you've like done an entry level role for a while, like kind of, like your opportunities get a little bit more limited in that sense, where it's like now your bar is a little bit higher. I think that like tactically, it's also very different. At least from my experience, it's like when I went to school, like they brought in like campus recruiters, like we were like the school set up interviews for you. There was like a whole like recruiting system built around like, my major. And then after college, it's all been kind of like referrals and like friends and like networking. So it's like the way that you go about like getting a job is like very different. I think that like it becomes less of like a systemized thing and more of just like meeting the right people and like hearing the right things, and like you don't get fed as much from like other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not so much sure like the post-college job search to that degree, but I can definitely echo what these guys said. I think there is like a lot of truth in like the pressure around like wanting just to sign early and just like coast senior year. I know like at least in the past year, I'd say like I think startups have become a much more popular and accessible career path. And that's either like just the way the industry is changing, or just like the fact that more opportunities are opening up to college graduates. And so startups actually, what I found was that startups recruited year round. So like there wasn't like a cycle where in the fall, like everyone's recruiting for every job, big or small, across any industry. And then in the spring, like most people aren't. For startups, it ended up being like a lot of the times their hiring timelines aren't like, oh, we can hire someone in like September and have them start like 9 months later. It's like we're hiring someone in April because we need to start them in May. It's like kind of like that. And so roles are constantly opening up. So yeah, there's like I think there's definitely a lot of pressure, like especially from bigger companies, because like at the time I thought I preferred a smaller company, but those opportunities weren't like working out for me. And so the only things on my plate were bigger companies. But then I just kept seeing startup roles open up, and that gave me confidence in like being able to just keep on searching for something that I actually wanted.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Yeah, cool. And after having been in like your role now, why is it important to consider the size of a company before applying to said company? And we can start with spice it up a little bit.
Sorry, start with who?
Shawn.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So why is it important to consider the company size? I think a lot of it is it's going to be like what you want to get out of this like first job of yours, or like like second job or whatever. I think that like kind of like the three things that it boils down to for me personally is like how fast I can learn, how much of an impact I can make, and the network that I'm building. So for example, it's like, for example, like if you're kind of like a very independent self-starter and like you like to learn things on your own, you will probably fit more at like a smaller company where you have like the greatest potential to learn faster. Whereas if you want like mentorship, if you want like more senior people like guiding you along, I think that's where like a big company will be like super helpful, because all the senior managers there, they have like years and years of experience and they could teach you a lot of stuff. Potentially also when you work for a big company, it's a little bit of it's like credentialing. Like there were times where I'm just like, oh, like I want to work for an investment bank, but it had to be like a bulge bracket bank. It had to be something that like means something on my resume. And a lot of times when you join like a small startup, you don't get that kind of credentials. Like no one knows, like this company could fail in like 2 years. Like no one knows who it is. And then I think like what you do and like the impact you make is also very important. I think when you're working for a huge company, you're very replaceable and you're working like on a very specific role. But if you're in a small company, you're making like a huge impact across the organization and your role is going to change like every day, you know? So I think it becomes a lot more exciting. But those are basically like 3 things I would consider.
Yeah. And what about you, David?
Yeah, for sure. I think that all makes sense. I think for me too, the one thing I really got out of college per se was like learning what type of learner I was. I found that I like did really well in like case and project driven classes and not like as hot in like classes where it was like purely observational. And I kind of figured that like in life, I like most things that I like take in and grow my knowledge through have been like through those 2 types of learning, like through like observation driven learning or like experience or hands-on driven learning. There's no like right or wrong answer, but I just found that I was more of a hands-on driven learner. And like having worked across like bigger companies and stuff, and smaller companies, I could see that like like my sandbox was just so much bigger at a smaller company. And like partially because there's just lower headcount, there's a lot more to do. Like your responsibilities can like are really like range from like different roles. And that usually lends itself to a little bit more impact, which is cool too. But I think for me, like having a company size that directly translated into the type of learning or into the type of learner I was really important. And so I think that's like the biggest thing I like drew out of like between like when I was considering working at like smaller versus big companies.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, so I also echo everything that was said. The way I like to think about the size question is like the smaller the company size, the more undefined your role is, and the more meaningless your title is. And that's both good and bad, and that has pros and cons, and it's very dependent on the kind of person you are. I think like one good example of this is if you look at a big company, or the bigger the company, the more structure they tend to have around different departments and teams. So you have like a marketing team, and an analytics team, an engineering team, a customer experience team, et cetera. And that's not the case nearly as much at small startups. And so what that means is that if you're at a small startup and you're in one role, like I'm in a product management role, or I could be in a marketing role, and I really want to do analytics work. Maybe I have a question I want to answer. I want to set this company up in a way that allows us to to measure a certain key metric. At a small startup, I have much more flexibility to just go do that because nobody else is doing that, and I may as well go do it. But at a big company, that's somebody's job. Like it's already a predefined thing, and so again, it is I think at least partially personally dependent. If you want more structure and you want to have like a singular laser focus on what you want to do, or if you like the idea of like going into work in the morning and doing something completely different from what you expected to be doing by the end of the day.
Yeah, cool. So I mean, I guess how does the importance of company size change depending on industry? Does it change at all, or is it pretty similar board? And I guess what came to mind when I was writing down, Shawn was in finance and now you're in tech, and so I was wondering differences in that were kind of.
Yeah, I think it does make a difference depending on some sort of industries. So like I guess like in the finance and tech example, it's like when you work for like a bulge bracket bank, you get access to like greater deal flow. You get access to like more interesting things that are happening in like like the world, and that kind of matters. It's like why I wouldn't work for like a like a tiny bank somewhere like not in New York City. But I think at like a technology company, like barring like kind of like Facebook, Google, or like those kinds of tech companies, like there are a lot of times when you work for a smaller one, you get access to like newer technology. You're working on like cooler things, and it's like more like groundbreaking. So I think like in those 2 examples, it does make a difference. Like I think if I was trying to do finance, I would probably join like a bigger bank right out of college. But if I was trying to do tech, like, and I was like an engineer or something, I might work for a smaller company because they might be working with like more interesting technology.
Yeah. Cool. I think it's a really interesting perspective. I actually didn't think about it in that question in that way. that makes I've only worked in tech, and so I don't have that ability to compare it to like an industry outside of tech. Within tech, I don't know if there's a huge difference that between like sub industries. I've worked in marketing tech, real estate tech, and now what I'll call like Hello Alfred is like hospitality tech or some weird version of that. It all feels similar to me in terms of like what my role is just as undefined as it was in other industries, and but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think similar to what Taylor was saying, I've worked at like product roles at different organizations, and like at least among the smaller organizations, it still felt like a similar flavor of product, and at the bigger companies, it was like a similar flavor of product. I think like product itself is like you kind of like like you said, Taylor, you show up to work one day and like you can be doing data stuff, you can be doing design stuff, engineering stuff, just because that's what the role tailors to. And whereas like at bigger companies, I felt like my like weekly forecast was more defined, and so like I could like more easily say like, okay, I know on Wednesday I'll get to this piece of work or that piece of work. Whereas at startups, it's a little more day by day. But yeah, other than that, can't really comment too much on the industry to industry case.
Yeah, I would also think it's also like the type of company. So like you have like services companies, you have like product-based companies and things like that. And for example, like if you were doing like consulting, I would probably, like I feel like it might be better to join like, McKinsey or Bain or something like that, where it's just like now it's like your clients are like, potentially better clients and you get more exposure to like that kind of work. But if you're a product company, I feel like it might not matter as much anymore because it's just like whoever's building like the best product.
Mm.
Yeah, so I guess now that I work at Uncubed, I've worked at larger companies before, and I find myself to potentially wear many hats. And like we kind of talked about, to kind of pitch these ideas that to the team, and they're more likely to listen because we are such a smaller company, which is cool. And that's something that I've actually never experienced before. I worked at a very large restaurant. So I remember when I would have ideas on how to better something, it was kind of like my ideas were kind of just tossed to the side because my role at that company. So it just didn't really have a place in saying like, hey, I think this could be better in this way, which is why I think working at a school, because your voice is heard. And so I was wondering, I guess it would be beneficial to size of the company that you currently work for now, just to give an idea too.
Hey, Chanel, can you repeat that question one more time? Unless somebody else heard it, but I think you were breaking up again.
Yeah, so it's an idea of your current company. We just tell them like where you work at.
Yeah, oh, yeah, sure. So like what the company does. That's a good place to start. So again, I'm a senior product manager at a startup called Hello Alfred. And Hello Alfred you can kind of think of Hello Alfred as like a home concierge service. The name Alfred comes from like Batman's butler. And so what we're doing is we're building a technology platform that allows a team of Alfreds that we have to run around New York City and the other cities that we're in and basically service our customers on a weekly basis and take care of their entire to-do list. So we have Alfreds that'll go into a customer's home and then look at their to-do list and do their grocery shopping, their laundry, dry cleaning. Perhaps they send a package out or they wait for a repairman to come to the home and fix something, et cetera, et cetera. And our mission is really to be able to handle any request that comes in from a customer, whether it's something that gets done in the home or out of the home or virtual, et cetera. So kind of like a life assistant for the masses, if you will.
That's cool.
Check us out at helloalfred.com.
Just to clarify, how large is the company that you work for now, too?
So we are probably probably about 50 at this point.
Okay, so on the smaller range, and then I want to go into a little more depth about what your company does and like the size of your company.
Sorry, I
didn't
didn't
cut out.
I didn't get that.
A little bit. The weather here is bad.
Yeah, sorry everybody. We're in a storm, so the Wi-Fi is kind of give me basically just to give the audience an idea of what size company that you currently also go into a little more depth about the mission behind your company.
Okay, for sure. So our company is probably it's really small. We started about 7 months ago. Right now we have about 5 employees, and we're actively hiring for 2 more. Basically, we are building a mobile app that provides door-to-door ground transportation for longer distance trips. So for instance, if you wanted to go from like New York to DC, we'll have a car pick you up, take you, like we'll switch you over to like a charter bus and then take you all the way to DC. And then we'll have like cars or like shuttle vans waiting on the other side. So we're linking up this like multiple modes of transportation to provide like one seamless experience. The cool thing that the market that we're trying to tackle is essentially this market of like long distance driving. So about 90% of all long distance trips right now, over 50 miles, are taken by personal vehicles. So people are just like sitting in their car every day, for like 3 to 5 hours driving themselves. And we think that like if we make it more accessible, if we make the transportation more demand driven versus like supply driven, then we can eliminate a lot of that. And that's kind of like where we are. We recently just launched the mobile app, so it's actually available between New York and DC and Boston. So if you guys want to go check it out, you could go to axletravel.com. Yeah, so I think like it's like right now we're small, but we're trying to like grow pretty fast. We just raised our seed round, and just getting things off the ground.
Sweet. Yeah. So yeah, again, I'm a product manager at Handy. I work on like user experience initiatives, so I guess I can talk more along about those lines too. But so Handy is a home services marketplace. So it's pretty similar to most other marketplace or gig economy startups that you might think of, like Airbnb and Uber and that kind of thing. And the idea is that if you have any sort of home service needs, so like you want to get cleaning, you want to get your furniture assembled, you need a plumber, you need an electrician, you need to get your doorknob replaced, like you can make a booking and then Handy will match you with a independent professional who will send service that booking. So it's actually pretty interesting because I think like the user journey is kind of like range between very Uber-esque where like supply and demand are matched like almost instantaneously. Because sometimes your pipe breaks, you need someone to come like the next day or even today. And then on the flip side, it's like very Airbnb-esque where like users want like more personalization and discovery. They want to build a relationship with the professionals that they work with. And so having to build a marketplace or even just working on a marketplace that flexes for both of those use cases has been a pretty interesting experience. But we are about 90-ish people, I'd say. Yeah.
Can I get an Alfred to do a Handy job?
That's a good question. So the way, yes is the short answer. The way it would work is like if you are at work for the day and you need a repair done at 2 p.m. on Monday, you could have your Alfred book a Handy for you and be in your home to let the Handy in, make sure they do a good job, and then send them on their way.
Interesting. Cool.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool.
Cool.
We all kind of work at companies, and what we talked about before was smaller companies may not have as many resources to lend. That terms of benefits. So I guess to start off, let's distinguish what a perk is. So I know Taylor and Shawn were talking earlier, finding what a perk and benefit is.
Yeah.
Shawn, I'll let you go first.
Yeah. So I think my view is it might be a little bit unconventional, but I think like a benefit is essentially like fungible with just money. It's like, it's just like here's like more money in like these other forms. So it could be like, I guess like vacation or like pay or like bonuses or like, like healthcare and stuff like that. Yeah. But I think perks, how we kind of like see it is that perks kind of define the company culture. So it's like, we'll like have perks that it's like we believe in as like founders. So for example, like we have like an unlimited book budget because we want everyone to just like keep on reading and like learning more things. So we'll just like buy everyone books. And then also we're big onto like mental health. So we'll have like kind of like a therapist budget and like things like that, where it's just like, if you want to go see like a mental health person, then we can do that. We'll like we'll pay for like gym memberships and things like that, because it's like things that we value as a company.
Awesome.
And I think it's like perks don't have to be like expensive or anything. It could literally be like a running club or like things like that, but it's just like things that you believe in and that you want to promote within your organization.
It's a really good distinction. I like that.
That was fantastic.
I thought about it before.
That Taylor, or do you know?
I can't possibly better distinguish than that. I thought that was really well done, and it makes perfect sense. Like the fungibility comment, yeah, definitely resonates with me. I think that's a good way to separate it. At the end of the day, though, it's I guess there is some kind of gray area, but yeah, Shawn, that was good.
But I also think that like there are companies in job descriptions that will sell perks kind of like, like it's like massages and ping pong tables and like things like that. And I think like those like they are perks, but I feel like they're not like the perks that matter. Like they're just like nice things.
That's a really good point, actually. I kind of don't love the quote unquote perk culture about startups that much. In part because like it's just so easy to fake it. Like I've read so many like startup job websites where they advertise these ridiculous perks, and I'm sure some of them are true, and I'm also sure that some of them are like completely bogus. In fact, at my first startup, there was a time where one of our company perks, this was publicly advertised in like the press and everything, was that we were our company had no deadlines. Deadlines did not exist in our company, and like that is just like a part of our culture, is that we don't have deadlines. Meanwhile, like the whole team is stressed out about like massive deadlines ahead of us. Like so when I hear about company perks, I definitely take it with a pretty big grain of salt.
Yeah, I think the biggest trap is unlimited vacation.
Oh,
it's like it's like there's studies that show that it's just like you take less vacations when there's like unlimited vacation.
I've only ever had unlimited, quote unquote, unlimited vacations, and it's definitely not very company dependent how that actually manifests itself.
Yeah, but there's also like so this isn't at my company, but I watched a talk by the CEO of Gusto, and he said that like every like kind of like year anniversary, he'll buy the employee like a plane ticket to anywhere, and I feel like that is a little bit more meaningful than like unlimited vacation, where it's just like here's your plane ticket. So I think that's like really cool.
Yeah, and it represents something about the company, which your earlier point, Shawn. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So
David, what are handy perks?
Yeah.
Kind of like the ones you mentioned. Yeah. I mean, I think like coming out of college, I was definitely driven in on perks. Like it helped that there was like free lunch and dinner and breakfast and like unlimited vacations. I was naive at the time. I mean, I felt like unlimited vacation, like, oh dang, like I actually take it. But it's like unlimited within reason, obviously. But yeah, then like, but I definitely see the perk side of it. I think that's what even like resonates with me more. Like, there are really fun things we do as a company that really do define the culture. Like every year we have something called Camp Handy, where like the entire company goes to like upstate New York for like 4 days and like rents out like a children's sleepaway camp, and like everyone cabins up and we all just have fun, play games, learn more about each other, and like I feel like that is like a really meaningful thing, even more so than like unlimited vacations and the free food.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I know a few startups that do retreats. I think that's probably like, I've never had that as a perk, but I think that's one of the best perks I've heard of, is a company retreat where you go away.
Yeah.
Because it's like you're both building a better team and culture, and you're also like really enjoying yourself.
Yeah, super important. Yep.
Yeah.
Leading into my next question, what are the perks that you do value personally, whether they're what you now or what you've had access to at a previous job? So I guess I'll start with Shawn. Like, what do you find, like you're a company, so you have a say in what perks are created. So
yeah.
So what are some that you
yeah, I think
add to
like
that?
I think my So it's like, so I guess like working at like different companies. So like when I was at the Climate Corporation, I think like the food and everything was like really nice. But it was also like, it was just like a way to guarantee that you stay at the office. You know, it was just like, it was like really convenient, but it was like really convenient to like stick around. I think right now the thing that I value most is probably like autonomy and flexibility. So I think it's like one of those things where it's like you don't have to go into the office. You know, it's just like we don't. It's like I just sat at home today because it was like really nasty out and I didn't want to go out of the office. But also like we've kind of designed the culture to be a little bit more remote, where it's like we have people working in like different parts of the world, and I think that's interesting to me because it's like we have an office, so if you want to come in and you want to meet with people, but also a lot of times for engineers, like an office environment can be like really distracting. You know, it's just like when you're like trying to like focus on like coding and people are just like walking up to you and everything. So that's something that I've kind of tried to like make like available to everyone. It's just like, hey, like if you have meetings, come in, but like you don't worry about it. And it's built around this culture of like trust. You know, it's like I know that like you're gonna get like your stuff done because it's like we trust each other and we have like really good like communication between us.
Mm-hmm.
I think remote work is probably one of the hottest perks today in startup land. For me, like I don't value it super highly. I definitely hear what you're saying, Shawn. I tend to be more productive when I'm in an office and working amongst team members that are also in the office. And I also like have worked with and managed remote teams as well. And like there are certainly challenges, but there are a ton of benefits, right? And I think long term, it does make for a really positive company culture that there's this like mutual trust that like you don't have to be in the office for me to know that you are working. I've just seen it be abused before, so I guess like I have a slightly different perspective, I suppose. It's also super person dependent. Like there are definitely the kinds of people that like are way more productive at home or on their own time or at 2 o'clock in the morning. And if you are that person and I would highly recommend that you find a company that values remote work because they are definitely out there. And if it works better for you, then great. And if that doesn't fit super well with you, then there are also plenty of companies, and it's the standard, to be in the office every day. I kind of like a balance, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think even at bigger companies too, remote work's become like super popular. When I was at Hulu, and I have like friends at like Facebook, even like nonprofits like Khan Academy, they let employees work from home like once or twice a week. And I think that better applies more to like the engineering side, because when you're at home, you won't have like product managers bothering you about stuff every day. But for like at least for the product role specifically, there's like a lot of people to people interaction, so it helps. I haven't really worked from home just because like I have to come in and like meet people, and like there's like a lot of talking that goes on with that, and so I feel like it's role dependent, like how flexible you can work from home. But yeah, in terms of like other like random culture-y sort of perks and stuff, I think like this one's not much of a perk, I guess. Well, it is to a product manager, but like at least for the product team itself, we all keep like open calendars. So like when I go schedule a meeting, it's not like busy. It's like you see what people are doing. And that level of like transparency and openness, I thought was really, really cool because like it let us, one, like get insight into what each other was doing, and two, like be able to like negotiate for each other's time on that behalf. And so I thought that was like a really interesting thing.
Yeah, that's cool. I don't have much to add on the perks front. I've not worked at companies that are like, emphasize perks a ton. Right now at Alfred, where it's very much the culture tends to be like work very hard, surrounded by people that are also working hard and you like, and you want to like, move the company forward with, and then you kind of go home at the end of the day and do your own thing. I think and expect that'll change over time, and as we need to scale and add more team members, I imagine perks are at the end of the day a strategy to do that. But right now it's just a pretty scrappy startup. And that on its own, frankly, is kind of like I see it as a perk. Maybe I'm a bit masochistic, but I really like the idea of like there is sweat involved in the work that we're doing, and it's not always like about playing ping pong.
Right. Yeah, and kind of like bouncing off of that a little bit, it's like, yeah, it's like at a startup, you don't really have like the resources to like bring in like a massage therapist like every day. But I think like one thing that we value is like one of our cultural trait is about like ownership and people like, you know, like taking responsibility and people taking the lead on things. And because of that, we're also like, you know, fairly generous with like our equity compensation, in the sense where it's like, you know, it's like we have people that are like technically interns, but we're like letting them like vest when they're like, you know, working with us full time, things like that, where it's just like, I think, you know, for the most part, we're very generous with that. And there's a book called like The Hard Things About Hard Things by yeah, and he's like, yeah, at a startup, you should just like give away like titles, you know, because it's like it doesn't matter and people want them. So I guess that's like why like Andreessen Horowitz, like everyone's a partner. And we were like thinking when we were like fundraising, we're just like, hey, let's just call everyone co-founders, you know, and then just go and like raise money from like Horowitz. But we didn't do that. But I think it's like, you know, like it's like kind of things like that that gives people a sense of like, hey, like they own this, like this is part of like this is their company as much as it is mine, like kind of stuff like that.
Cool.
Yeah, so I guess takeaway from don't fall into the perks trap, be kind of alluring in a sense, which is interesting that we talked about remote work, because when I first started, that was the first presented with that option. Oh, and I thought I was just gonna be home every Tuesday, Thursday, because that's it. But it's important to kind of find out what kind of worker you are. Time I found that working don't actually get, and if I don't leave the house, I find myself, which kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds good, and I know a lot fresh out of college, so I don't want to have to go to an office at 8 a.m. Which there are jobs where, you know, it's also important to not get carried away with like this. Maybe that's really good that y'all kind of touched on the idea of remote work and perks too. I guess my next question would be, you have two job offers. You agree with both of them, and perks aside, like what ultimate point personally for what job you want to pursue?
Yeah, I can talk quickly about that since I just considered that very. Yeah. I think like we've talked about obviously a bunch of different things, like but like role and like that obviously like company mission, whether like you vibe with like the direction is important. I think when I was looking for startups specifically, one thing I really valued working at a startup, like when I was interning, was like the closeness of the team, like being able to go to work every day and like basically hang out with your friends. That was like a really, really cool thing that maybe it's just by nature of the fact that startups have like younger people working at them, or maybe it was just like the teams I was on, but like I really got along with the team that I'm working on, and like it's really nice to be able to like not only learn from them but also like have fun with them. And I think like that's like a huge thing I was looking at, that I, at least when I was doing my interview circuits, that I found like resonated more with startups and maybe so larger companies. And then the other thing I wanted to look at was like basically track record, I think. And I don't mean this in like that like the CEO is like a serial entrepreneur just like pumping out companies left and right. But I think like what made me end up choosing Handy over some of the other startups I worked at was that even like with Handy, like there was like a period of up, then a period of down, and then they like leveled out again. And like I feel like having a startup with like senior leadership at the helm that's like kind of gone through that whole cycle is like a really valuable learning experience for them personally. And like so it helps when like you have people who've kind of been there, done that, and like can steward you guys out, even if situations like that arise in the future. And also just cool to talk to them about it, learn more from their mistakes and that kind of thing. I thought that was like an interesting lens in perspective that I would have gotten at Handy versus like another startup that's like just been like on a rocket ship up and like hasn't seen like the small downticks yet.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I mean there are like so many things to consider when considering a single job offer. I think it does become more unique, I suppose, when you're having to consider two separate job offers. I have not had the luxury of doing that, and if you are one, like, consider yourself super lucky, first of all, because that's an awesome spot to be in. I think that one mistake people often make in that kind of spot is comparing salary or compensation. I think, like, if you're on this this hangout, you're probably not like super profit maximizing anyway, because you're interested in getting into, you know, early stage startups, which is good. I think, like, you know, comparing like, oh, this job, you know, has $10,000 more in salary, or it's like, you know, 5,000 more shares of the company, therefore I'm valuing it higher, is, I mean, maybe this is just personally, but I think is often a trap. And like, if you fast forward your career, 10 years from now, when you look back, I highly doubt that $10,000 is going to make much of a difference to you. And what's going to be much more valuable is like, is the company, is the people you're surrounding yourself by, like the best people you can be surrounding yourself by and can be learning from and growing with. I think that'll pay much bigger dividends. So I guess that's kind of like an anti-answer. It's something that's something not to do when comparing job offers, is putting too much weight on like what at the end of the day is like not super meaningful salary differences.
Yeah, for sure. I was actually in a position after graduating, after the Climate Corporation, where I had two offers, and one of them was literally like 50K more than the other. It was like a big difference to me, you know? And I was just like, wow, like that sounds really attractive. But I went with the other one. And the reason was because I was 100% focused on just like my personal growth and where I see myself, like, you know, like kind of in the long run. It was just like, I knew I wanted to start a company. So like, is it better for me to join kind of like a later stage company, or kind of like go on the ground floor of like this like really early, you know, startup and get like, you know, a huge, like, I wasn't like getting like a pay cut or anything, but it was just like, wasn't like, the opportunity cost was a lot less. But I felt like that was where I could like learn the most. And that was where, like, you know, like that investment would pay off in like 5 years, not necessarily like, oh, like this is giving me more money now or anything like that. So yeah, I would say like, don't do it for money, do it for like kind of like your long-term goals and like your personal like development.
Yeah, same with the long-term goals thing. Like, I think one of the things that helped me kind of frame like choosing between different stuff was like, in the long run, say like 10, like 20, 30 years down the road, when you like quote unquote make it and you get like a Wikipedia page written about you, like your first job is probably gonna be like one small like paraphrase or some phrase in like some larger sentence on your Wikipedia page. And so things like title, like compensation, like even perks, even like that all like gets thrown out the window. And what really matters is like, okay, like, does this taking this opportunity make me directionally correct toward where I want to go? And if you can set the flagpole and have that level of like patience, I guess, so to speak, and focus, it'll definitely like pay off its dividends later down the road. But yeah, I think that's like an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah, that's a sick way to think about it. I love that.
Yeah.
Finding a job that's a good fit, it starts with kind of understanding what you want to learn. So I guess my next question is like, figure out, you knew your long-term goals. Like, how did you figure that out? What does that look like? I need to just figure out a job and etc. Does it come along the way of having several different jobs? What does that look like?
Yeah.
Whoever wants to, Taylor.
I can start. I have definitely, I'm on one side of the spectrum here on this one, which is I have had a pretty solid picture of like what I've wanted to do for a while now. Since college, as I mentioned earlier, like I wanted to get a job at a startup, but I think like broader, like I knew and I still know that I do want to start a company and build a company someday soon. And so all of my career questions have been like laddering up to that larger goal.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's actually what even led me into product management, because I started out in sort of a sales and account management role, and because that achieved the goal of getting into a startup, right? And then once I achieved that goal, it was then, okay, well, what's the next step? Well, for me, it was moving into product because I felt, or I have a hypothesis that the best sort of CEOs have product-y type backgrounds. And then once I, became a product manager at a startup, then the question was like, well, what industries do I want to focus, et cetera, call narrowing down. But that's like, there are many, many people not in that boat where they don't know exactly what they want to do. And I have friends and family who are in that boat, and I think the advice that I tend to give is, if you are in a position where you don't know exactly what you want to do, there's almost no wrong move, because any move could be a great move. And that's like hopefully kind of freeing in some way. If you don't know what you want to do and you don't know what industry you want to work in, there's really not, the cost of like, quote unquote, making a wrong choice on like industry is not super high. And so that's kind of cool as well. So that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think like you never really, it's never like a precise thing, it's like you just want to like be in the right direction. I think for me, like, it's like I definitely didn't know what I wanted to do. Like, I went to school for finance because like, a ton of people were doing it and it was supposed to be like a hot thing to do. But I think like kind of like looking at the world, and I was just like, hey, like, like technology is going to take over everything. So it's just like, maybe I should move in that direction. And I was just like, okay, like, let me like, go to like a tech company. And then in my head, I was like, oh, I also, I do want to start a company. So like, it probably won't be as helpful working for like a large corporation. So let me like move towards like a smaller, company and like figure things out there. So I think it's like, you always like, every day you're getting more information, and it's like, you shouldn't like lock yourself into anything like preemptively. So I think like, if you don't fully know what you want to do, like, it's like, yeah, like you probably won't like go wrong, but also like try to keep opportunities open. It's just like, it was good that I like kind of joined this large company, because then at least like, I got like a little bit of like this credentialing or something, and I could use that for something else. But if I just like joined like a really small like biotech company that was like building this like really, specific thing, that might have not been like a good opportunity for me to like branch outwards from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, I mean, long-term goals are like moving target, especially if like we're all still young. And so like, we probably do not know what we're going to do like 20, 30 years down the road. But kind of similar to like Taylor, I do also like kind of want to start my own company one day. And I found the role that closest aligned with that I could most successfully get into was like within product management. Just because you get to wear so many different hats. I feel like for most of like, at least education in like America, like you're like in elementary school, you're like, oh, I can be anything I want. And then like in college, you're like, I can be like one or two things. And then like, if you're a PhD student, you're like, okay, I'm definitely doing this. And like product management was kind of a gateway into like, oh, like I'm a little bit interested in design. And so like, I can like read up on how to like build great user experiences or user interfaces. I'm a little bit interested in engineering. Like I can like, I don't know, push some front end code some days. And then I'm interested in like actually understanding how to like synthesize all that together. And like when I was in college, I started like a startup, and like that gave me insight into what the role was like in terms of, it's like pretty mirrored to product in terms of just like running along the whole gauntlet of like product development cycle, and like having that experience was just like also just like purely interesting too. Like I feel like as like even a short-term goal, building up to the longer one, a longer long-term goal one was that I was just like interested in like product management in that field in the practice, and I wanted to like get better at that. And it just so happened that also lined up with like a longer term career goal, so it seemed like an obvious choice for me.
Yeah, very cool. We actually have a question from somebody watching. This comes from Andrew Chin. Says, I've changed career a few times from finance to design and product management. I'm a bit older. Now I'm taking classes in UX design. What advice can you give on how to find a job in a startup, since I feel that there's a lot of editors?
Chanel, what was the very end of that question? I feel like there's a something.
Yeah. How can this person find a job in a startup? Younger competitors.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think like I think that's like kind of like a, maybe not like a misconception, but kind of like a generalization that like, you know, we're going to just hire really young, scrappy people or anything like that. But we value experience a lot. You know, I think like we do value it a lot. And I think like having like a wealth of experience across like different industries and like different applications, I think that is like super valuable, because I think like the genius ideas happen when you like connect like seemingly like unrelated things and like turn it into like something like really awesome. So I think like having a, like, I wouldn't like feel bad that you haven't been doing like UX for like your whole life. I think that like what would matter for me is kind of just like showing that you can like, you know, do these skills. Like it's like having like an awesome portfolio, having like relevant experience and stuff like that. But I think like in terms of like framing kind of like yourself as a candidate, it would be like, hey, like, you know, you're more than just like a UX designer. You can like do a bunch of all this stuff. And I think like what we were saying before, like with startups is like you're always wearing multiple hats. So I think it might be like, we have this thing where it's like we look for like the jack of all trades and master of one, you know. So it's like you should be able to kind of do everything, but you should like own like one thing. And I think like being able to do that at a small company could be useful.
Not only that, but being a UX designer with a finance background is a really dangerous combo. I've worked sort of like tangentially to the finance industry. I've done like insurance tech and real estate tech, which like they have very similar characteristics to like what the finance industry is like. And I can tell you that having like a true finance background and joining like a fintech startup as a UX designer is a super like amazing route for you. I think your name was Andrew, but I'm not entirely sure. It's a super amazing route to take, and you are very uniquely qualified for that role. So yeah, I agree with Shawn that like I think there is a bit of a misconception about age at Hello Alfred. Our really actually our only designer right now is she's 40 years old, and she's an amazing designer and has tons of experience and is not like 23. And so yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing at all, especially if you have super relevant experience in another industry like finance and can join a fintech company. I think that's a really good path.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I don't have much to comment elsewise, but I think tactically, like, so we're like actively hiring for like a senior product designer, which I know is a little bit different from like a specific UX designer, but I feel like the general principles are the same. I feel like a lot of like, and obviously like one of the big things in these roles is like portfolios, like what other work have you produced on the side? And one thing I see not too often is like UX teardowns. I feel like those are really cool to read and like really like show that you own the understanding of like what's like the user's job to be done and like how does that flow end to end in some product. You can even UX tear down the product of the company that you're interviewing at. I feel like that'd be a cool read for them. And if you want like a good example, there's a site called useronboarding.com, and they have a really, really funny but also insightful teardown of United Airlines as a booking.
I've seen that one actually.
Yeah, it's so good. It's really good. But yeah, I feel like those things, like obviously you'll have like UI stuff you've worked on, like either like a cool site you designed or like a cool interaction you designed, but like even just like a straight up write up of like in screenshots and annotations of like a specific user journey, I think is like something that I haven't seen as much, but I feel like is like a really, really powerful addition to any portfolio.
Yeah, so we're coming to the last 5 minutes of the panel, and I just want to kind of open it up. We did kind of discuss beforehand that your said companies are specific roles, so if you want to kind of talk a little bit about that, and then also kind of see answer for our viewers to contact in, or if they have like follow-up questions, is that okay? To
Yeah. Who wants to go first? I can go. All right. One of us will start. So yeah, you can, first of all, you can more than welcome to reach out to me. My email is very simple. It's taylor@helloalfred.com. And Alfred is hiring across the spectrum for more junior roles. It's a lot of business development type roles, customer success type roles, etc. That's a great role for somebody who might not have like a technical background, like an engineering background or design background, but still very much wants to get into a startup and get exposure. And then, which is exactly what I did, right? I joined like as a sales product, as an account manager, and then moved in from there. So if that's of interest to you, feel free to reach out to me as well. Or if that's not of interest to you and you still want to reach out, you're more than welcome to. Happy to talk.
Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me as well. It's Shawn at axletravel.com. So it's SHAWN. And we are hiring as well. So primarily we're looking for design and engineering in New York City. So we're big on the remote work, but it's like it'll also be cool to build a team in New York. So more so kind of like senior level, I would say. But I think we're, just open to really talented people. In general, we look for, like qualification skills, but then like the most important things are like traits and like if, you guys have the company DNA. So that's, yeah. So feel free to send me resumes or hit me up on LinkedIn.
Cool. Yeah, I just started, so I'm not really involved in any hiring process, so to speak. But I know, like, in terms of the additions to the Handy team, engineering is growing the fastest, and I definitely know we're hiring across the board, junior to senior, on that side of things. And I think you just find it on our job board. And then on the product org, yeah, like a senior product designer, we're actively looking for, as well as another like new grad product manager, kind of like me. So you can definitely hit me up at dwang@handy.com to ask me more questions about that, about this specific role and program, because it's pretty cool.
Cool. I forgot to mention that if you go to the Hello Alfred website, we do have a name your superpower job that you can apply to if you wish, and we do actually pay very close attention to that. So if you think that might be a good fit for you as well, if you have a skill or something that is not listed on the site.
That's an awesome idea.
Yeah, that's so cool.
I might steal that.
We've got a lot of like really interesting applicants because if you just look at like you see the engineering roles and like like account management roles and nothing quite fits your like super analytical data science background, but you love Alfred, it's just like a great kind of catch-all.
Can I apply for like a Batman role? Like would that be cool?
All right. Well, that kind of end of the hour. No extra questions at this time. I just agree so much for taking the time to answer these questions and share your experience and view. Again, everybody, if you want to reach out to the three of them, they just mentioned their emails. You can email, LinkedIn, whatever they prefer on there. And yeah, that's it. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
See you later.